Just like barrel-leg jeans, open marriages appear to be having a moment. Nearly 1 in 3 unmarried Americans report having been in a consensually non-monogamous relationship at some point. So consensual non-monogamy or an open marriage or polyamory is distinct from cheating, which usually happens in secret where only one person knows about it. In Australia, there was a survey in 2023 of 50,000 people, and that revealed about 1.4 of them were currently in an open relationship. So it's definitely growing. And dating apps like Field say that they have seen up to a 500% increase in users, including terms like ethically non-monogamous or polyamorous or open in their profiles. And OkCupid has also reported similar growth. There's a lot of gossip about high-profile figures in the media and Hollywood about who is in an open relationship that we cannot repeat here. But the question is it a good idea? Well, maybe for some, but not for everybody. There was an essay in The Cut this week called I Opened My Marriage, Maybe I Should Have Tried an Affair Instead by a writer called Hayley Molotek. And she wrote about her experience. She got married to her high school sweetheart. She'd been dating this guy since they were both 16. And a few months into their marriage, in that first year, they opened it up. And writing about how she explored her motivation to do this, she wrote, there was a real desire at the beginning of my attempts at an open marriage. That desire fit perfectly over what I was too afraid to admit, that I wanted a feeling more than I wanted anything else, that I wanted it so badly but somehow not badly enough to do anything smart or kind for everyone involved and leave my marriage. I thought that was so interesting. And then she sort of talks more about, is it infidelity to have a flicker of desire for another person or to foster an unexpected crush? Did I want the right to act on every impulse, or did I only want to retain the right to a realm of feeling that remained my own? If what we need is a secret, then there's no form of communication that will help. If what we need is freedom, then there is no form of forever we can trust. Amelia, why do you think there is this movement now to open marriages? What's different about this point in time? Is everyone just sick of the partners they might have been with in the pandemic?
I do think there's been a real sea change. Obviously, non-monogamous relationships have always existed, but I kept thinking about, do you remember that iconic scene in When Harry Met Sally, which is, by the way, 25 years old now? Carrie Fisher's character is in bed with her husband, and both of them have fielded calls from Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal about how awful dating is. And Carrie Fisher turns to her husband and she says, tell me I'll never have to be out there again. And her husband says, you'll never have to be out there again. And he puts an arm around her. And the whole point is dating is awful. The whole point of getting together with someone is that you don't have to keep dating. And what's interesting about that article is I thought it was a wonderfully written article and it really gave me an insight into why people do this. But they had been together since high school. And I wonder if there's some element in relationships which have been going for so long from such a young age where it's only natural that you might get to the point where you need a bit of novelty in things. And
exploring other versions of yourself, because something that people talk about in long-term relationships is that you don't always like what you see when you look at yourself through that person's eyes because of the drudgery and the history of everything you've been together, which in some ways is intimacy. But as Esther Perel says, that familiarity can breed out desire. So I think that as awful as you say dating is, I think what can be attractive about it to people who've been in long-term relationships is that excitement.
Yeah, breed out desire is the perfect explanation for the look my husband gave me this morning when I asked him to clean the kitchen on my way out the door.
Yeah. It's not, you see too much of someone, and I think sometimes it's actually the desire to have a secret. And that's what I was thinking reading this, is that if you have an open marriage, that itch isn't scratched, because then you have to have all these awkward conversations. She writes about the language, the corny and embarrassing language that you have to use that's all about boundary setting and the rules and all that, which isn't very sexy. So I think that for a lot of people it doesn't work. And I've always thought, and I think this is sort of what the writer was talking about, that if you have an open marriage or if you have an affair, then you often fall into a state of something called limerence with someone. So if I was in an open marriage and I went and met someone, in an ideal world, I could keep this kind of world spinning and that's all great, and then I go and dip out of this when it suits me. That's not how desire works. Like limerence, this thing that you get in the really early stages of a relationship with someone, the butterflies, the can't sleep, the obsession, the infatuation, the lust, has to take. Like it has to take from something. And if that's what you're after, I think it's like it is like a finite pie.
Here's what Esther Perel, the relationships expert and guru, said about why modern relationships and modern monogamy is just not the answer for everybody anymore.
So reconciling our need for security and our need for adventure into one relationship, or what we today like to call a passionate marriage, used to be a contradiction in terms. Marriage was an economic institution in which you were given a partnership for life in terms of children and social status and succession and companionship. But now we want our partner to still give us all these things, but in addition, I want you to be my best friend and my trusted confidant and my passionate lover to boot, and we live twice as long. So we come to one person and we basically are asking them to give us what once an entire village used to provide.
So is this idea of why open marriages are becoming more popular just because for some people they're accepting that they can't get everything from one person and it's healthy?
Yeah, I thought that this Esther Perel remark was really interesting because I think often the knock on an open marriage is that it is a way of essentially ending the marriage. It's sort of like a stopgap on the way to accepting the inevitable that the marriage has run its course. But what I think Perel is saying is that it doesn't have to be like that. In fact, it can be a way to ensure the relationship's survival by taking the pressure off your romantic partner. Now that we expect them to be everything, it's a way of turning outwards rather than caving in on each other. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing this profusion of open marriages at a time when childcare has become reduced to often just what the nuclear family can offer. So you are running a daycare, a non-profit daycare, in addition to trying to keep some kind of romantic spark alive.
Yeah, and Esther Perel also says that there are two different types of relationships. One focuses on exclusiveness. That's really critical to some people's sense of what makes a romantic relationship. And the other is uniqueness. And if you believe that you have something unique with that partner, then it doesn't matter if there are other partners involved too. But I also thought, the writer said non-monogamy works just about as well as monogamy does, which is not very. Whether or not she opened her marriage, would this relationship have ended? Probably. And there are lots of – it's hard to tell whether any of this works because relationships end every day for all different types of reasons.
Yeah, so what I've been hearing from people anecdotally in my circles is that they're opening their marriages at the time that they have little kids. And to me at first that was really confusing because I thought, but there's no time or energy at that point. But maybe that's exactly why they're doing it then, because there are so many demands on their time and they're feeling so stretched in their relationship that are
you feeling sexy when you've got little kids? Or is that the whole point? That you see yourself in your partner's eyes as a mother?
Yeah.
And obviously, your children all over you. So to me, that was my strongest time of identity as a mother and my biggest, matrescence, when I went from being a woman to being a mother. And do you think that people are opening up their marriages at that point? Because by being with someone outside of that family setup,
they don't have to be the mother.
Yeah, you don't have to be the mother or you get to be just the sexy woman again.
But I was intrigued by the logistics of it because, you've got to account for every minute of your time when you have little kids.
True.
And so I've been asking how people do it. And then apparently the most common way of handling it in a heterosexual couple where they have children is that one partner does 1 week with the kids and then the other goes off for their sort of fantasy life and the enactment of that for a week.
Wow.
And then they swap back again.
But maybe it's just an acknowledgement that one person, that you complete me idea, just isn't realistic. And we know that the divorce rate's going up and up.
Is it? I thought it wasn't.
Well, interestingly, the marriage rate, which I didn't
Yeah.
realize this, has been declining for 5 decades. There was this little bump after COVID, but now it's still going
Really?
down again. People are, I think, disenchanted with the whole idea. And also life expectancy, as Esther Perel points out, has gone up at the same time.
What's interesting is that the demographics where this is most popular, unsurprisingly, is young people and in queer communities. So Dan Savage, who's a very well-known sex and relationship agony uncle, I guess, he has for many decades been very open about the fact that he's in a monogamish relationship is how he calls it. And he talks about how in the gay community that's actually quite common in the male gay community. And in queer communities, that's also become more common than perhaps among straight people. So
It's interesting. I think queer communities have had this incredible freedom to make their own rules, and straight people are learning a lot from that.
yeah.